Concubines lived solely for the emperor, and they were made to die for the emperor. They were his to do with as he pleased, including taking them along with him in his afterlife for entertainment, servitude, and companionship. During the Ming Dynasty, concubines of the deceased emperor were horrifically buried alive alongside the emperor in his burial chamber. Today we'll explore the tragic fate of imperial concubines after the death of the emperor in the mighty Ming Dynasty. The Ming Dynasty era was from 1368 to 1644, lasting for 276 years. It has been described as one of the greatest eras of orderly government and social stability in human history. This dynasty became a global superpower, undertaking major sea expeditions before Christopher Columbus, and producing books before the invention of the printing press in Britain. However, beneath the surface of stability and groundbreaking innovations, there existed a darker and more macabre facet. The cruelty of the Ming emperors knew no boundaries and was specifically targeted towards the imperial concubines. Some emperors had an astonishing number of concubines, with figures even reaching upwards of 9,000. These unfortunate women had been kidnapped from their homes and were forbidden to leave their gilded prison, except when they were called to the emperor's bed. Since the barbaric practice of foot binding was prominent at this time, the hobbled women could not run away or even walk into the emperor's bed chambers, but instead they had to be carried with nothing on to the emperor. During this era, imperial concubines were regarded as personal possessions of the reigning emperor, granting him full authority over them. Regrettably, most of concubines never had the opportunity to meet the emperor in person. Instead, they endured a life marked by bitter loneliness, jealousy, and intense competition for the emperor's attention. Paradoxically, beauty was more of a curse than a blessing in China during this period of history. However, their primary obligation remained to fulfill the emperor's sexual desires and to bear children for him, as many as he could father. Yet even this duty could not protect them from the abhorrent fate that awaited some. The most inhuman part of concubinage was the fact that concubines accompanied the deceased emperor into his afterlife, and serviced him there for eternity. This cruel tradition ensured that even in death, these women were bound to their role of servitude, forever dedicated to satisfying the emperor's needs. The gruesome practice was inherited from the Mongolian dynasty by the founder of the Ming Dynasty, Emperor Hongwu. The practice was specifically implemented on concubines of the deceased emperor who didn't bear any child for him. Two primary methods were employed to carry out this macabre ritual. The first method, known as living burial, involved the cruel act of confining concubines within the tomb of the deceased emperor while they were still alive. They were left to endure a harrowing existence in the tomb, eventually succumbing to thirst, starvation, suffocation, and overwhelming despair. Struggling against their horrifying fate, they could only wait helplessly for death, unable to conceive a way to save themselves. As a result, in the prime of their youth, these unfortunate girls were forced to bid farewell to life and continue serving their masters in eternal darkness. Undoubtedly, this was an unimaginably cruel method of burial, surpassing even death itself. The second method, known as death burial, offered a slightly swifter end. Concubines were either executed by palace eunuchs or chose to take their own life, normally by hanging themselves with a silk scarf or by taking poison. On the fateful night of their destined demise, these beautiful young concubines were granted one final lavish meal in the grand dining hall of the Forbidden City. Subsequently, they were led by the eunuchs to a side hall where a row of chairs awaited them, neatly arranged. A white silk sheet hung above each chair, its purpose chillingly evident. The concubines, calm yet burdened by their impending fate, allowed their heads to be gently secured by the silk fastener. As the eunuchs removed the chairs, the concubines were left to depart from this world with a sense of eerie serenity. For those who found this method visually distressing, an alternative option was to choose poison. Numerous small bottles containing various poisons were readily prepared, including substances like wine, arsenic, and crane red, each with its unique taste and lethal recipe. These poisons were mixed with the finest flour, dew, and wine available within the palace. Surprisingly, the taste was actually quite good and the effect was very fast. After all, they were concubines, the emperor's beloved women, and they may not have had the freedom to choose to live, but they had the right to choose how to die. When the whole process was done, lifeless concubines were laid to rest alongside the deceased emperor in his burial chamber. The purpose behind this practice was rooted in the belief that emperors would continue their existence in another realm after death. The emperor, desiring to maintain his status, ensured that his own women and numerous vulnerable items accompanied him in the tomb. It was believed that these offerings would enable the emperor and his entourage to continue their esteemed and privileged existence beyond the earthly realm. The concubines who either bore a child or were barren, a different destiny awaited them. These concubines were given honorific titles and were granted the privilege of living within the palace for the rest of their lives, thus shielded from the horrors of immolation. In some rare cases, some low-level concubines were allowed to go back to their hometowns and resume their lives as normal citizens. The cruel tradition of burying imperial concubines alive was put to an end upon the death of Emperor Yingzong, the 8th ruler of the Ming Dynasty, who passed away at the age of 36. Prior to his death, he issued a decree to cease the inhuman practice of interring concubines alongside deceased emperors. This long-standing custom had been prevalent since the beginning of the Ming Dynasty. Thus, the Ming Dynasty's legacy bears witness to both the splendor of its achievements and the depths of its cruelty. As one contemplates this remarkable era of history, it serves as a reminder that even within the most illustrious periods, darkness can seep through the cracks, leaving a haunting legacy for generations to come.